Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. Welcome to another episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today we're joined by the founder of IceConnect, Haree Patel. Hi, Haree. How are you doing?
Not too bad, Andy. Yourself?
Yeah, very good indeed. So you set IceConnect back up in 2003, and you provide IT support systems and phone systems to small and medium-sized businesses with a niche in dentistry. That's you, isn't it?
That's right. And I'll tell you what, I started off as a one-man band. We're now at, I think the count is 14. We moved into new offices last year, and I tell you what, it's amazing. Business has never been so fun to do. When you're a one-man band, it was a lot more difficult, and everything fell on your shoulders, and having a team has been amazing. And it's allowed us to expand quite nicely, actually, in the last few years. So it's good.
And we can see you're in your nice new offices now.
We just moved in last November. It was a bit of a challenge getting here, but we were in here last November. Obviously, COVID and all that played its part. The team absolutely love the new offices, and it's interesting what the new office space has done for team morale, and the environment we work in has helped build a better team, and it's attracted a better caliber of staff as well, which is amazing as well.
But I know we had a conversation before you moved, because you know that we refurbished our office, and you were saying kind of how did that work and how did it go? And I think it does. I think it says a lot to your team, but also the profession and the industry you work in, that says we're investing. You know, we want to get better. And I think we spend so long together in our office, it's only right that we should provide conditions in an environment that, one, we want to be in, but also our team working with us. Because if they're inspired by the space and they feel comfortable, you know, they're going to be happier in their work, which means their clients get better results and you as a business get better results. So there's no downside to it at all.
I think the other thing that also leads into talking to you, Haree, is the fact of, I think sometimes there's a recognition, isn't there, as a business owner, that actually it's not your bag. You look back at us, and when we first sort of built our first office, we sort of like did the planning, which was like buy a desk, buy a chair, buy a filing cabinet, get a computer and a phone. And it's when you then realise that you sort of have to say, actually, this isn't what I do really well. I need to engage someone else to do that, because the danger is I just sort of like bumbling around when there's better solutions, which actually are probably more cost-effective solutions. So I think it's the fight. Same with everything. You know, it's worth paying the money to engage someone who's going to look after you and do it properly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Interestingly enough, when I first moved out of the spare bedroom of my house where I first started up, and I went into an office space, it was a serviced office, and I just about crammed in 3 desks in there. And I was like, if I was the Indian, this would have been a multi-story office space with a floor above and everything, you know, stuck as many people as I could in. And to be fair, up until maybe last year, that was the mentality, you know, buy the cheap desks, get as many people as you can in. And we got to a point where the way we want to grow the business, the way our business mentality was, and it now occurs to me, my office is an extension and a representation of the business we're in and the business we do. And if that's not a nice, enjoyable environment, then no, your team's not going to enjoy it. And you're going to attract a different type of clientele. Already just having a sign outside, we're just off the main road here, and just having a sign outside and people driving past all day, every day can see the sign, especially because it's lit up at night. And when new clients call them, they say, oh, I know where you guys are. I see you guys all the time passing your office, what have you. So makes a massive difference. It
does.
And you're right. You have to get the experts in to plan the office space at some point. Now it's no longer a case of let's just buy a few tables and chairs off the internet.
No, definitely.
I think you're right. I think that whole knitting together with brand values, it says a lot about who you are, but also I think it's a statement about the future. You know, it's an investment today, because this is where we are, but where we're going. So no, I think it's a great thing.
I think that's the key word, and it's an investment, not a cost.
Exactly. It's always an investment, not a cost. I say that to Mrs. Acton all the time. You make a lot of investments, Caroline.
But you know, you say that a lot of dentists, I think they're the ones who will appreciate the most the costs of running a practice, putting in new chairs, refurbing a practice, all of that. They're sky high. And in comparison to not to belittle it, but putting a few desks, chairs, and tables around the place. Theirs is also a bigger investment. So you can understand, they understand that there is an investment.
Yeah.
And when they see that in your company, they're better placed to appreciate what you have done for the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I hadn't appreciated that. Obviously, we started working with you in the mid 2000s, and I hadn't appreciated that you were so young as a business when we started working with you, which I think is probably testament to how you presented yourself and what you had to offer. But that was quite early days for you. And I think that we started out that we kind of moved over our kind of hardware and software to you. But now I joke that other than the fridge, everything else in the business that plugs into the wall, you and your team look after. Because you do our, the thing that you do our hardware, you do our software, you do all of our telephony, you manage our broadband for us, all of our security systems, all of our backup, all of our remote services. And in the last year, we've been so heavily dependent on all those remote services. So for us, we never thought of you as being like a guy that we use to buy stuff in. You are like one of our partners without a shadow of a doubt, because if we're going to make a decision that involves technology, we're going to have that conversation with you first off, because we might have ideas, but you're then going to go, guys, actually, that's a really bad idea because you should do it this way or that way, or have you thought about this? So you are absolutely one of the people that we see as being kind of on the inner circle when we're thinking about developing our business.
Technology's changed so much, hasn't it? You remember the guy we had before, that little small bloke who came from Kent or something, and as you tried to do anything, it was like... Whereas when we moved to you guys, it was like a revelation. We never really knew IT companies could be that efficient.
Well, you've just rolled off an entire list of IT stuff we do for you. We mentioned lease lines, the phone systems, your security, your backups, your servers. And as you're reeling that list off, I thought to myself, I was like, wait, I actually used to do all of that myself, and I. I think when you joined, we had a team of about 2 or 3 at that time as well. And then in and amongst all 3 of us, we used to do all of that individually. And I look back at those times and I think, wow, I couldn't believe I most probably did all of that. Now we have dedicated people. Here's a security team. Here's your connectivity team. Here's a server team. Oh man, I can't even fathom it.
It's amazing how it's moved on. Amazing how it's moved on.
I thought he was going to say I'd have to put our price up.
We'll have that conversation offline.
So today we're going to have a chat about managing a crisis. So the whole underbelly of this Dentology podcast is to basically share information for the business side of dentistry. There's loads of clinical information out there, but ultimately people are in business. So we thought it would be useful to have a conversation about managing a crisis, specifically from an IT perspective. And there's a specific area that I'd like to pick on a bit later as well. But I know from our own experience, we had an IT crisis because our server basically died. And from recollection, I think there were 3 drives in the server. And I think you always say that one might die, but a couple would survive. And we were in an extraordinary situation where 2 of those drives
never happens.
Work.
Never happens.
Apparently never happens.
IT guys, never happens. 2 drives fail.
And for us, having your guys turn up on site, you got us back up, and we were back up and running within 24 hours. We needed new hardware. You recovered all the data that we thought was lost, but you managed to recover it. This was back in the days when I guess the backups weren't as routine and regular as systemized as they are now. It was many years ago. And that at that point, I think we really appreciated the importance of having good IT support, but also a crisis gets managed well when you've got preparations in place in anticipation of a crisis. So if it never comes, you never have to worry. But when it did come, you were well set up and prepared to help us. And
calm.
Well, there was no drama about it.
There was no flapping. There was we'll get on to this and get this sorted.
There's a fine balance here, and pretty much every business we deal with are small to medium businesses. So the systems we had in place with you, without getting too technical, you had a server, 3 drives, 1 went faulty, as you said, and a second one went faulty. When 2 go faulty, you've literally just lost all of your data on that physical unit. So essentially, we had to restore it from backup. There's a very fine balance between the size of business, how much you spend, and the type of protection you want on your data. Now, you've got to remember, the larger organizations can throw millions of pounds behind something like this. But small businesses can't afford to do that, but they still need a level of protection. So in your scenario, the best solution was a cloud backup. Get your data, put it into the cloud. So if it ever needed retrieving, we could restore it from the cloud. There were two options. There was a local backup and a cloud backup, which is why we were able to recover your data so quickly. But there is that fine balance. You could have had a scenario where you had not only those hard drives all mirroring each other, but another physical server mirroring your main server. It would have doubled your cost on your infrastructure, doubled your cost on the software side of things, for example. But you'd have been a lot more redundant. There would have been almost zero chance of you having any downtime whatsoever. And this is the biggest question we try to answer for clients is, where is that line of, what is affordable and reasonable as a spend to my business for that level of protection? And it is really a case of every customer is individual, every client is individual. I'll give you an example. You might have, a surgery with a practice with one surgery. Where there's one surgery, you're not going to be spending £10,000 a year on backups, for example. But now you go to the higher end practices, which might have maybe say 8 to 12 surgeries in there. Suddenly £10,000 a year. Not saying that is the figure, but it seems a little bit more palatable because
it's proportionate.
The volume of data going through it, a lot more proportionate. So you have to make it reasonable for everybody. And in your scenario, you had what I thought was a reasonable backup. Evidently, it proved to be correct.
Yeah.
You had a local backup and a cloud backup, and that seemed to do us well.
And with an increased reliance on IT as time's going, if you imagine, the amount of, just intraoral scanners, the digital imaging that they're creating, the files are just getting bigger and there's more of them. Do you find that clients are, as their reliance on IT increases, is their understanding of the protection they need increasing in line with it, based on what you said? Yeah. So, because there's loads more IT in businesses generally, specifically within dentistry, but are they kind of also expanding their understanding of the potential issues that could come down the line with IT as well?
I think if I was to be perfectly honest, I think it's gone in the opposite direction. And the reason it's gone in the opposite direction is everybody is saying, oh, all my data is in the cloud. A lot of these software packages are moving to the cloud. For example, you've got SFD, you've got Dentology, not endorsing any of those, not saying one's better than the other, but they're two cloud-based platforms versus your software of excellence and your R4, which were based in-house, and you needed, to some degree, a server in-house to run these. Because they're in the cloud, everybody thinks, oh, it's all in the cloud, don't need to worry. Things as simple as your Office 365 is in the cloud. Things as simple as your SharePoint, which is a file share for organizations, is in the cloud. So people are now oblivious to the idea that needs protection. They think it's in the cloud, it's being protected. If you look at the terms and conditions for pretty much all of these companies, starting with Microsoft, the largest email provider in the cloud for companies being Office 365, Microsoft 365, it says specifically, we do not back up your data. So let's look at the worst case scenario. You delete the mailbox. You have someone who maliciously comes into your company and starts to delete emails and starts to wipe things, and you find out several weeks or months later that they've been doing this. Or a worst case scenario, and don't say it won't happen, Microsoft's system all goes offline and suddenly they've lost all of your mail and all your mailboxes. Then what do you do? The terms and conditions state they're not responsible for any of this. Wow. So no company thinks that until we educate them on this. It needs backing up, and it needs backing up by a separate service, a third-party service, and it needs to be done. If you have in-house equipment, that decision is a little bit more expensive to do. So you will have to put a separate backup in for your server and for your data. But to answer your question, if someone had an in-house server with all of their data sitting in-house, they will be attentive to the idea that, yes, I need to back this data up somehow. But as everybody starts moving to the cloud, and especially over the last 12 months, as many people as possible have tried to move to the cloud where they can. It just supports remote working. It supports people accessing data, patient information from home where they don't have to turn up to the practice.
And Harry, do they have to be careful about where that data is stored? I seem to remember you saying once that, the danger is it's stored in America, which means it's not subject to UK laws. Is that still the case? And do people have to be aware of that and think about that? Or is it just something they don't think about because the cloud is the cloud?
So this is another important point. A lot of cloud providers are US based. And with GDPR coming into force here now, it means that they've almost specifically endorsed the idea that you have to have your data stored in the UK and or the EU, depending on the type of data. Where you're dealing with patient data, it would be a very difficult argument to say my data is stored outside if anything was to happen. My strong advice is store it in the UK. There's no reason why you can't. When you're backing up data, it needs to be backed up and encrypted whilst it's being backed up, encrypted while during the backup process, during the storage process. These are all GDPR essential requirements. When you look at it, that's what they're going to ask for. Cyber Essentials also ask for this kind of stuff as well. So, yeah, to answer your question, store it in the UK, use a backup provider which provides a UK location. Just because the company is UK-based doesn't get location.
How many people know that? I mean, that's a real nugget that you've given. And I wonder, not just dentists, but how many business people just don't even think about that stuff.
They generally don't. It's not something they... First of all, to get them concerned about backups is a difficult job in itself. So when you then have the conversation of where it's stored, is going to be another conversation. And look, frankly speaking, it's more expensive to store data in the UK than it is the US, even though your data has less of a distance to go, purely because there's a million providers in the US doing the same thing. So competition rules determine the price to be cheaper. Here, there's not as many people.
But it's like lots of things in life, isn't it? Those issues kind of don't raise their head until there's a problem. We had a scenario where one of our guys was arranging life cover for somebody, and the person had gone online and found something significantly cheaper. But the scenario that the person had to die in was so extraordinary, this policy would be very unlikely to pay out. And actually what they needed was something bespoke. And I guess we all fall into that trap. And I guess in many ways, anyone who's searching for anything based on price probably isn't the sort of customer or client that we're looking for anyway. And if that is their primary driver. And I guess from what you're saying, I guess the perfect solution is to avoid an IT disaster. That's the perfect solution. But the real world being what it is, that isn't going to happen. So I guess the stage from there is you then have a disaster recovery plan to say if it hits the fan, what do we do to get it fixed? And is speed the most important thing in addressing it? In that if there's an issue of some sort, is moving quickly important, or is it as important to not move too quickly and thoroughly understand the situation before you take any action?
Before I come on to that point, a very important point we should realize is when you're looking at normal businesses, if I make an inquiry with your company, for example, you'll grab my name, my email address, my phone number at best, and God forbid you got hacked and someone stole that data. Okay, they've now got my mobile number and my email address and my name, maybe even my address, my home address. That's the worst case scenario for your business. And a bit of Googling around, a bit of hunting around, it's not too difficult to find any one of those things. When you look at dentistry, you're looking at private, confidential, personal medical history. And it may not just be limited to dental history, because dentists have to collect the whole medical history for patients. If anything was to happen to their data, if their building got hacked, their computers got hacked, their backups got hacked, or they were stored in the US and that US company got hacked, you're looking at a worst case scenario of someone's personal medical information being exposed. So the danger element of that is a lot higher than the risk of your data getting hacked, which is why dentists need to be a lot more aware of who's backing up their data and where they are backing it up. It's much more important for them than it is for other normal businesses. So they have to put a higher priority on this stuff than any other business.
It's a higher value, isn't it? I suppose if you had a GDPR complaint, or if you had someone with ransomware or stuff like that, that's probably a higher value than our data or a normal business data, I suppose. Isn't it?
And when the ICO office do an investigation into any data which is hacked or which is exposed to the public, they will look on that weight of the type of data that has gone, and they will fine accordingly based on that. And if I'm not mistaken, you can be fined 2 or 3 times your turnover.
I was going to say, it's based on turnover, and I'm not sure it is. It's either 2 or 3 times. Which say a dental practice with £500,000 of revenue, which isn't extraordinary. At all. You could be looking at somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million in terms of for a data breach, and that brings it into stark focus, doesn't it, in terms of how important it is to make sure you've got systems that are
bankruptcy.
It is
bankruptcy and out of business.
That is, you're at the point of finishing at that point, aren't you? I mean, not to mention the patients you're going to lose after they find out you've lost all of their data. So definitely working. But to answer your question of what to do in an event, speed is of the utmost importance. So depending on what's happened to you, I mean, if you've had a hardware failure, such as your scenario, if you've had a hack and your data's been stolen or it's still happening, speed is of the utmost importance in any one of those scenarios. In a hardware failure, the faster you act, the more data you could save. In a hacked scenario, the faster you act, the less data is going to get stolen. And, in any simple scenario like that, it is very important to act reasonably fast. And again, that will be part of the guidelines which you put in. Most companies should have some sort of disaster recovery policy or some sort of policy to say, this is what we do in the event of a major outage or major hardware failure. Speed is perhaps the most important thing there,
And I want to come on to ransomware in a minute, because just on that specific point, there seems to be a kind of increased cases across dentistry. But before we get to that, we were talking earlier in the week, and you used a phrase that I wasn't particularly familiar with, but it was called social engineering. Just for the listeners, just explain what social engineering is and what it is, because honestly, that blew my mind. I could just see how people would fall for this all day long.
I'll give you the best example here. Let's say I wanted to get access to your network, or I wanted to drop a digital bomb in your network. I'd need to somehow physically or virtually get access. So how do I do that? I have access to Facebook. I'll friend you on Facebook, or I'll friend your friends on Facebook, and you'll see I'm a common friend and you'll add me. And I'll start putting these little questions out there. Without offending anybody, your maiden name and the name of your first dog is your porn star name. So what's your porn star name? Now they've got the name of your first dog and they've got your maiden surname. Then they'll say, if you
people answer these questions all the time.
All day, every day.
Because it's a game. That'll be funny. I wonder what my name is. And you're not appreciating, you're giving away important information.
There's that Russian face agent thing, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You've got something as simple as, here's a horoscope. Whatever month you're born in tells you what sign you are, or tells you what character you are, let's say. Comment below with your character. So you'll write, for example, you're born in December, your character is Mickey Mouse. Now they know you're born in December. Then they'll send another one to say, if you bank with Barclays Bank, press this link. You could be due £1,000 in underpaid interest for the past decade. Click that. They now know you bank with Barclays Bank because you've clicked the link. So just by having you online for about half an hour, bored, clicking away, thinking, I'm just having a bit of fun online. I know your mother's maiden name. I know your pet's name. I know what month you're born, and I know what bank you bank with. I'll send you an email to say, Andy, your Barclays Bank account is low on funds. Click here to see how many funds are available in your account. Or here's an update to our terms and conditions. Click here. Most people don't or your account is overdue. Something which needs a bit of urgency. Your account is overdue. There you go. You'll click the link. To verify who you are, here is your maiden name. Here is your security password as your pet's name. And here's the month you were born in. Oh, yeah, they know me. They've got all my details correct. I'm right in. I might even put my bank account details in, my social security number, my NI number, my card details, what have you. But even better, they've got you to do something via your email. So now they know you're responding to your emails and you're active on your emails. They're going to send you another link to say, we've verified your details or something of the sort. Click here. And you'll click that link. As you click that link, it now downloaded a digital bomb onto your computer without you realizing. Most of the time, it's ransomware. What they can now do is have full access to your network if it's not set up securely. They can digitally lock all of your files and ask you for a ransom of pick a number out of a hat, and that will be the number they ask for. And unless you give it to them, you can't carry on. That's how it works. It's all social engineering.
And when you lay it out like that, we all sit there and think, well, I wouldn't get caught by that. But actually, if it's dressed up in a bit of a gamification on a Facebook page, or your friends are sharing this stuff through WhatsApp or whatever it might be, you can see how you could get drawn into it. And then I suppose some of ransomware, and the reason that came up is I've been talking to the guys recently, and it seems that dentistry seems to be on the radar at the moment for ransomware attacks. And I know that, I guess, one of the most important things is to have your team trained to a level where they potentially identify the risks of ransomware when it comes in, so you don't get hit in the first place. But if you do get hit, what are the things you should do and the things you shouldn't do if you get hit with a ransomware attack?
So ransomware specifically, the first thing you should do, if you know that there is ransomware or you suspect it, switch off all of your computers, unplug everything you can from the network. That's the best thing you could do, because you just don't know when it's starting and stopping. I mean, it does act extremely fast, most probably faster than you could react to it, but it could still be in your system. And just because they've locked your files doesn't mean someone's hacked in and started looking around on your network as well. So switch everything off immediately, shut your servers down, unplug it if you are still a bit more conscious that maybe it's not enough, and then call your IT guys. They'll be the gurus. They'll be the guys who can solve this for you fastest. There is a caveat to that. Most people now take out these cyber security insurance policies. And if that is the case, they'll make it a condition of their policy as well, that if this scenario was to happen, you've got to call them as well as your IT guys. So they might then send their own crack team in to start dealing with this for you. But most importantly, switch everything off, call your IT guys. And if you have the insurance, call the insurers. At this stage, you don't know your exposure. You don't know if it was ransomware or not. You don't know how deep they've got into your network, what access they have to your details or your data. And you might be getting away lightly, you might not. It's a difficult one at this point, but first point of call, shut everybody out, including yourselves. It might mean you have to cancel your appointments or do everything by hand. It might mean that, there's going to be a massive disruption. And I'll be perfectly frank, if it is a ransomware attack, there's going to be several days of disruption ahead, maybe even a week or two, depending on how exposed you are. Don't take matters into your own hands. Don't act on emotion. It's very important. Don't start doing things thinking, oh, I'll get out of this quickly. I've seen the ransomware email. I'll pay the guys. I'll get access to my data. I'll be honest, 9 times out of 10, when you pay the ransom and they send you what's called an unlock file, it doesn't work. Or it will only work for a certain percentage of your data. Then they'll ask you for more and more and more. So there's no point paying the ransom.
So where people request an amount of money, because it seems from what I'm hearing is the amount of money requested seems to be relative to the business they're targeting. So I guess they understand the approximate size of the business, the value of the data, and going back to what you were saying about it being health data, they probably just do a calculation and say, well, 10, 20, 30, 50,000 pounds, whatever it is. But what you're saying is just don't pay the ransom.
No, well, even if you paid a ransom, there's no guarantee you're getting the data back. So there's no point paying it. At this point, you should be thinking, thank God, I've got all my backups in place. I've got a 3-to-1 backup policy, 3 copies of the data, 2 different types of medium, and at least one of those backups is offsite. 3-to-1 backup, very important. But that's what you've got to depend on now. And that is going to be your quickest way to get back up and running. The problem with paying the ransom is not only are you showing them that people are willing to pay, you're expanding their industry. You're giving them reason to carry on. And you're now showing them that you've done it once, you'll do it again. And this is the danger of paying ransoms. The other problem is, back in the day, if you looked at let's say about 6-7 years ago, we've taken on clients who've been hit by ransomware and come on our door and said, we need your help. About 6-7 years ago, ransomware, the prices they were paying, that you have to pay in Bitcoins, by the way. So you then have to go through a whole process of buying Bitcoins and sending it over. They were about £3,000, £5,000 at best. We're now going into the hundreds of thousands of pounds. In the last, let's say, 12, 24 months, I don't know anybody who's been hit by ransomware with a request of less than £100,000. So unless you've got that kind of money you're happy to throw away, it's not worth it. Would you not rather turn around and say, you know what, inevitably, I'm going to be hit by ransomware. Now, I don't want to throw £100,000 away, but let me spend 10% of that over the next 5 to 10 years. Invest it into your business. Invest it into your protection. Look at backups as just another insurance policy for your business.
Going back to the social engineering piece, Haree, that's human weakness. So I assume the way you get caught with ransomware is it's human weakness, human error. It's, a human being does something, which then creates the opportunity for them to sneak in. This isn't just a technology-driven access. It's somebody clicking on something. So I assume that training and awareness within a team is an important thing as well. And how regularly should that take place? How do people best access training to make sure that it's something that people are constantly aware of? Because we all go on courses, and in that moment you come back and I must remember that. And then, 3 months later, you kind of, it's still dropped off your radar a bit.
Yeah. There's a lot of things from an IT perspective we can do to protect the network. We have a 40-point plan of protecting clients' networks. And we go through all of them one by one with clients. Now, one of those points is user training. Users are the biggest weakness in any network. Sad to say, they're an essential part of the network. Otherwise, there would be no need for a network, unless you're doing a Tesla factory, then there's all run by robots. But I digress. Look, users are the weakest link in the network. You'll bring USB keys in. Your friend's emailing you, oh, here's a great horoscope, click on it. Your UPS link, which you're expecting a parcel for, may not be UPS. You click it and it opens up to be something else, and virus explodes on your network. So yes, users are the biggest and weakest link. Several things you can do to protect yourselves. Training is just one of them. Now, I believe users should be trained at least once a year. They're going to get fed up a bit more often if you train them more than that. That doesn't mean it stops. I mean in-person training, somebody to show them. But every couple of weeks, every month or something, you could drop them an email to say, guys, here's a new thing which is out. Just a reminder, don't open emails which don't belong to you, or you're not expecting from UPS, don't open it. Or please don't use USB drives in the company. Once so often, there's no harm in sending out these emails. But they are the weakest link. So as IT companies, we expect that. So we try to secure everything as much as we can before it gets to the users. To give you an example, we try and filter out all the crap out of emails as much as we can before it gets to you. Email filters are perhaps one of the most important things. And it'll take out attachments, take out links, anything which the email filter suspects is anything dodgy before it gets to you. So there's little thinking needed on your part of, is this for me or not? It's been done for you. Antivirus software, something very simple. I implore people not to use the free ones available online or the cheap ones. They are free because they don't do that great a job. They're designed for home users. pay for a decent product, you will get the reward in multiples. So a good email filter, a good antivirus filter, a good firewall. And gone are the days where a firewall is something geeky where someone puts at the edge of a company network to stop everyone coming in. It's now filtering all of your data. So it will look at every website you go to visit, give it a score and say, this is dodgy website, this is not. It will look at entries which you use to get to the website and say, this is on a blacklist. We're not going to let the user go there. And if they want to, they have to escalate it. So it's scanning absolutely everything, not only coming in, but also going out. So it knows. They also have this new product, well, not so new, but new for users, data loss prevention. So if you have a malicious employee, that could not physically be a person, but it could be a robot put on your system to send data out. It starts scanning and says, that's a lot of data going out, which is unusual for this type of data to go out. It'll put a block to it. So it puts blocks to things like ransomware because it sees that a lot of data is going out or hacked data. So very important. Firewalls are no longer preventing people from coming into your network, or not only doing that, it's now preventing outgoing traffic on your network as well. So very important to look at little things like this, which protect the users, which means that you're putting as least responsibility on the weakest link of your network as you possibly can. Take the thinking out of their hands, put all the other protections in place, and that will pretty much fix it. And a point on this ransomware or antivirus software, just because you got hit today doesn't mean it came into your network today. It could have been sleeping on your network for several months with a timed delay to go off. Think of it like a normal bomb. It's a timed delay to go off. So you don't know it's there until it's actually gone off. And that's the most important thing. You could have prevented that for 3 months. You didn't know it was in your network. It was still snooping around, doing what it had to. It's only when it triggered that everything started to explode. So little things like that, user protection, but user training is also just as important there. Yeah.
Well, it's
scary stuff. Really.
Absolutely fascinating. And in many ways, it's whilst we're specifically talking about, ransomware and IT, I think lots of the things we've talked about will help people manage non-IT crisis as well. Because it's that thing about being prepared, planning, making sure your team know what to do. What should you do? What shouldn't you do? Because, I was talking to a guy who's got some dental practices in London the other day, and he had a burst pipe, he had a leak. So he had a flood in his practice, a completely different sort of crisis. But you still need to have that kind of disaster plan in place to make sure, what do I do? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? Well, you should turn the water off. It's stupid things. Who do you need to let know? Do you need to cancel patients? What members of your team need to know about it? So, like I said, whilst this is specifically IT, I think crises come at us in different shapes and forms. But it's good just to get a steer specifically on IT because we are becoming so much more reliant on it. In the last year, we've just used it in so many different ways.
I think for me, part of IT is the fact of you don't even know you're using it.
Yeah.
So it sort of becomes that just forgotten thing, doesn't it? It always works. I know with my son, it's quite funny. Obviously, I'm of a certain age where technology, when it first came, quite often didn't work. So therefore, I'm reasonably prepared for when something doesn't work because sometimes it doesn't work. But he gets very frustrated because most technology nowadays works.
It's so
reliable. Plug and play now, isn't it?
In the old days, if something didn't work, it was like, it's not working. We'll have to turn it off, turn it back on, see what happens. Whereas now, when something doesn't actually work, people get massively frustrated because 99.9999% of the time, it just does what it's supposed to do. And I think that sort of almost builds in this, you forget about it. It's a bit like air.
Yeah.
We all need oxygen and air, but we don't even think about it. We all use IT, whether it's phones or laptops or whatever. Even telephones now, they're IT, aren't they? They're not telephones anymore.
Yeah.
If you think about any crisis, like you said, Andy, absolutely. Imagine having a car crash, for example. Almost immediately, people kind of figure out what they have to do. I've got to take the details down and maybe take some photos, call the insurance company. Do I need my car recovered or can I drive home? All of these things come to us naturally, but not many people experience the IT disasters. And I think that's one of the main reasons most people should have a documented disaster recovery plan. And that is going to be the plan. God forbid you're going to have a disaster. You know it's going to happen whilst you're on holiday in Dubai and your whole team is sitting there thinking, what do I do? Running around like headless chickens, like I haven't got a clue what to do. All you have to do is open up this folder. It's sitting on there in page 15. That's our documented plan.
Would you have it on your computer or would you have a hard copy?
Both.
There you go. It's on the computer. Oh no, the computer's not working. Where's disaster recovery? Oh no, nightmare.
Exactly.
Look, best case scenario, we have it on ours. So you just call us or your IT company also have it documented. Call them. They'll tell you exactly what to do. I think that would be the best point of call. But the important thing is don't panic. The worst has happened. Don't panic. Let's try and resolve from it. And you will have to be a little patient in this kind of scenario. If you're hit with ransomware, for example, it's not a quick solution or an overnight solution. It's going to take a little while to get.
Andy and I can confirm that you are on speed dial in our phones, Harry, in case anything ever goes wrong, because we've experienced when things don't work.
Well, I hope the listeners take a lot from this, and what I hope people don't do is kind of, skip over and say, "Oh, that won't happen to me," because that's
never going to happen to me.
Those are the sorts of things that do happen to you, and I think putting some planning in place and having some systems to protect you in the unlikely event of it happening, because, like you say, IT is incredibly reliable. It might not go wrong, but it might be a failure or it might be a malicious attack. But whatever it is, we're now so reliant on IT. We need to make sure that there's a system that brings as much of that data back as quickly and in the condition that it was prior to the crisis as swiftly as possible. So I think listeners will take a huge amount from this. And like I say, if they review their own systems or they get in touch with you, whatever it is, but people definitely should make sure that they're fit for purpose.
Just think about it, isn't it? Don't take it for granted. It's silly, really.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just to summarize on that point, it's very simple, a procedure for them to follow. Even if, and I'm not endorsing not putting any of the other protection measures in place, but as a basic model, you have to have your backups in place. And they have to be several forms of backup, not just, he backs it up onto a USB drive he takes home every day.
3-2-1. That's what you want, Harry. You want a 3-2-1 system.
Exactly that. Is it tested?
Preferably
is
one off-site.
Yeah.
You guys need a job in my office.
We've been listening. Now we've been listening.
No, that was it. That was as much as we know, Harry.
Brilliant.
That was it.
And anyone who doesn't believe that these things happen and it won't happen to them, if they really honestly believe it, come and spend a day or two in my office. I'll start putting some of those calls through to you of when they come in. And we can't help everybody is the honest answer. You might be one of those people which we have to turn around and say that there's nothing we can do because you didn't have these measures in place. You've lost your data. And now you've got a real hard thought about where's my business going? What am I going to do? What do I tell my staff? What do I tell my patients? How am I going to come back from this? And the sad case is some people won't.
I was going to say, it's not overstepping the mark. This could ruin your business.
Couldn't it?
Completely.
I was thinking, what do I tell my bank?
Well, yeah. And the thing is, and even if it doesn't ruin your business to the point where you lose your business, your reputation could be in tatters and could take years to restore.
You just go backwards, don't you? Just go backwards.
I mean, just ask yourself, because we're dealing with dentists, let's ask the dentist to put themselves in the shoes of a patient. You're going to see your consultant or your GP, and your GP tomorrow turned around and contacted you to say, we had a data exposure. Your personal information is been put into the cloud and is available for anyone and everyone to see. Our IT system failed or wasn't up to scratch. How do you feel about your GP now? Would you go back to that same GP for further treatment? You might have had the best doctor in the world, but the GP practice as a whole didn't do a great job at protecting your data.
It shatters your confidence. And it's not just about the data breach, is it? It kind of shatters your confidence in everything they do. Because if there's a weakness in that area, it just makes you question. It just makes you question everything. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, if you look at backups, we're talking about costs of maybe £100 or £200 a month at best. Maybe not even that much. It's not that expensive. It's not unaffordable. So any practice not doing it really has to question their ability as a business owner. It's as truthful as that. And without being offensive to anybody, you really do have to think their data isn't worth to them what we think it should be worth to them if they can't spend £100 or £200 a month on backup.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3, 2, 1 backups, like you said.
Exactly. Yeah, I learned that today. No, it's been brilliant. Yeah, Ted Rogers, isn't it? Years ago.
People won't remember that.
They won't.
Only people of a certain age will remember Ted Rogers.
They will. No, Harry, appreciate it.
Hands up, I haven't got
there we go.
That is.
Don't give me that line.
And Dusty
You're
Bin,
just pretending you're young.
Everyone will go and Google it now. Ted Rogers and Dusty Bin.
They will. So, Harry, that was brilliant. Well, towards the end of each episode, what we do is we ask a couple of questions. And a couple of questions for you is the first one is, if you could be the fly on a wall in a situation, if you could watch a situation play out, what would it be and who would be in that room?
Oh, do you know what? I've thought about this, and I really think there's a few I could go through. One of them is David Cameron's cabinet when they were still thinking about Brexit and the conversations they were having around this and how it went abysmally wrong. I'd love to have been the fly on the wall because I could have written a book about how not to promote your campaign.
Yeah.
That's the first one. But really, coming back to more recent times, I'd love to know what the government's strategy is on this whole COVID handling. Who's doing what? Who's got which contracts and why they've got this? In fact, you know what? I don't need to be a fly on the wall. I need to be a pen in Dominic Cummings' pocket. That's all I need. He has the best stories about Brexit so far. COVID. And nobody's got it better than him. And it's affecting us all now. You know, at the start, it may not have affected everybody. Okay, everyone went into lockdown, but financially and business-wise, it's affecting so many people now. And I sometimes think, what are these people thinking? Some of the nonsense sometimes they come out with. And I'm not saying anybody's got it completely right, but surely in a room of, I don't know, some of the most intelligent people we think in the country, politicians. Okay, some people may not agree to that. One person has to jump out and say, actually, let's do it this way. But I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in some of those meetings.
Yeah, and I guess until we're in there, a lot of it is a bit like if you watch a football match, isn't it? You know, we chip in like with a manager and we know more than anybody else. But actually, we're not. And I guess you have to hope these people have more information available to them than we do. And of course, we get very heavily swayed by what gets reported in the media. And I can only hope that it's such a challenging environment. I like to believe these people are doing the very best they can. But you do question some of the decisions that have been made.
I think sometimes it's emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
If someone says, is there someone who's going to go, let me just ask you a question. I think that's a tricky one. In all walks of life, not just in government, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Haree, thank you very much indeed for your time. I've really enjoyed our chat. It's been fascinating. I think our listeners will get an awful lot from this. I know you're a busy guy, so like I say, we really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just noticed that Haree strategically positioned his chair so as you can see his logo.
Yeah.
And not cut up by the top of his head.
5 centimeters low. There you go.
As he slides down.
I won't push myself up.
No, see, that's not good.
Sitting. I'll just slouch a little bit.
No, that's brilliant.
That was a real Steve Carell moment as you just slid down in your chair. That was perfect.
But brilliant, Haree. Thank you very much.
Really good time. Thank you. Look after yourself. Cheers.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Well, Haree Patel, he delivered some gems for us, didn't he, today? I think the thing that got me was when you were talking about social engineering and how they capture information.
It's so scary.
Oh, it blew my mind.
Were you going back through your head thinking, done that, done that, and now I'm thinking, stupid, really stupid. Didn't see why I was being asked to do it.
And I hadn't really thought through all the ways in which not only do we get IT services from Haree and his team, but our increased reliance on IT. And it makes me think whether people have upgraded their own view in terms of protecting themselves.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because I think that when we started in business over 20 years ago and kind of we had a server and that was kind of
a dial-up.
Yeah, whereas now you think how reliant we are on IT, and if we're not constantly investing in protecting our data and protecting our clients, then actually we're falling behind.
I think the thing that it struck me again really is we forget that it's there. It's a bit like I'm alive and I sort of don't think about being alive, but I am alive. And we use all this IT and it's so connected in our office. You only have to look around at how we're connected to everything. Our phones, our iPads, our laptops, everything.
Well, we become so used to it. And also I think because it's so reliable, it's always there.
Yeah.
You don't ever kind of, back in the early days with the internet and like say you dialed up or the connection dropped out. It would draw your attention to the fact that it's there. Now everything's so reliable. Yeah. And in many ways, there's some danger in there as well, because you kind of forget that there's risks attached to it as well.
I really hope that people listen and it just makes them think, $100,000. Yeah. If that's 100,000 on ransomware, that's a lot of money, especially off the back of, what could be a very tricky situation. With COVID.
It was a great episode. It was a great listen.
They're good lad. It was a good lad.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.